In most stories, the protagonist is easy to spot. They're the one with the most screen time, the clearest arc, and are often the only obvious center of the narrative. But Vinland Saga doesn't play by those rules. In its first season, it presents something more complex. It shows us two characters, who despite being at odds, also walk parallel paths that start to twist and tangle until they're almost indistinguishable. Thorfinn may be the face of the story, but Askeladd feels almost like its soul. And together, they form one of the most fascinating dual protagonist dynamics in modern anime. At first glance, Askeladd is just the antagonist, or at the absolute most optimistic, a violent anti-hero. He's the man who kills Thorfinn's father. He's the man who leads a band of vicious Vikings. He's a manipulator, he's a liar, and he's a killer. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that he's not just a villain. He's a martyr, a foil, a mentor in the most twisted sense of the word. Thorfinn follows him not out of admiration, but out of obsession. He wants revenge. He wants justice for his father. But what he gets instead is something far more complicated. Years of proximity to a man who, in his own brutal way, begins to shape Thorfinn. Askeladd is a character of contradictions. He's cunning but principled, ruthless but philosophical. He speaks of honor while bathing in blood. And yet, there's a strange consistency to him, a code buried beneath the chaos. He sees the world for what it is, cruel, indifferent, and ruled by power and legacy. And in that world, he carves out a space not just to survive, but to manipulate the tides. Thorfinn, by contrast, is raw emotion. He's grief and rage wrapped in a boy's body, swinging a blade he barely understands. He doesn't grow in the traditional sense during Season 1, he festers, and that's by design. Because Vinland Saga isn't about immediate transformation. It's about the long, slow erosion of ideals. The way time wears down even the sharpest edges. And in that erosion, Askeladd becomes something unexpected, a pseudo-father figure. Not in terms of warmth or affection, obviously, but in influence. He teaches Thorfinn not through lessons, but through presence. And while Thorfinn doesn't realize it at the time, those years spent chasing vengeance are also years spent absorbing something deeper. That's the brilliance of Season 1. It's not just a revenge story, it's a story in inheritance. But not of blood, instead of ideology. Askeladd's actions, his choices, and even his final moments do more than end a chapter. They plant a seed, and that seed doesn't sprout until years later when the story takes a shift in purpose. Season 2 is quieter, slower, and with the introduction of Einar, this tone shift is made evident. It trades swords for soil and battles for introspection. And in that silence, alongside his new brother Einar, Thorfinn begins to awaken. Not just from the trauma of his past, but from the shadow of Askeladd's influence. These traumas manifesting in his ever-present and visceral nightmares. Though in waking, he can't seem to grasp it, but there's something deeper in these dreams he just can't remember what it is. The lessons that once seemed buried begin to surface, not just as memories, but as questions. Who am I without my revenge? What does it mean to live without violence? And what kind of man do I want to become? These aren't just questions that stop at identity, but instead reach into topics of morality, of legacy, and of whether a life built on violence can ever lead to peace. It's here that Askeladd's role as a dual protagonist becomes fully realized. Though he's no longer physically present, his ghost lingers in every decision Thorfinn makes. But Askeladd isn't the only voice echoing in Thorfinn's mind. The ideals of his father Thor's remain just as potent, quiet, unwavering, and deeply human. Thor's taught that true strength lies not in taking lives, but in choosing not to. His philosophy was one of restraint, one of peace, and one of dignity in the face of violence. Askeladd, by contrast, believed in survival through cunning and sacrifice, in shaping the world through force and manipulation. And yet Thorfinn carries both of them. His moral compass is forged in the tension between these two men. The the father who preached peace and the man who embodied war. And while echoes of the past continue to make their impact, there's also the equally influential Einar. He gives Thorfinn new purpose. He shows him how to create life, where in the past he only knew how to take it. It's this intermingling of principles and ideals that makes Thorfinn's awakening so compelling. He doesn't simply inherit one ideology, he wrestles with many, trying to reconcile the contradictions into something that feels right. And in that struggle, he begins to define himself, not as an extension of any individual man, but as someone who must choose his own path. Thorfinn's evolution isn't just shaped by the people he's met, it's shaped by the time he spent carrying them. Memory becomes its own kind of battlefield. The years he spent under Askeladd's command, the lessons from his father, the faces of those he's harmed or failed to protect, they don't fade, they accumulate. Add in the impact of Einar on top, and the weight adds up fast. And Vinland Saga doesn't shy away from showing how that weight can bend a person. Thorfinn's awakening isn't a clean break from the past, it's a reckoning with it. Where Season 1 is fire, shown through rage, war, and chaos, Season 2 is earth, shown through stillness, growth, and reflection. And together, they form a complete arc, not just for Thorfinn, but for the viewer. Vinland Saga dares to ask what happens after the revenge story, after the violence of war, and after the story we're used to ends. And in doing so, it creates something unique. A tale where the villain becomes the architect of the hero's humanity, where the man who once broke Thorfinn now somehow also begins to put him back together. It's not always a clean journey, and it's certainly not always a happy one, but it's honest. And in that honesty, Vinland Saga finds its power. Power not found in the clash of swords, but in the quiet, painful march toward peace, where peace isn't portrayed as a passive state, but instead an active pursuit, the pursuit of the true warrior. It's something that must be chosen, fought for, and protected, often at great personal cost. Thorfinn's newfound journey with Einar toward peace isn't about forgetting the past, it's about refusing to let it define the future. And in a world that glorifies strength through violence, his decision to lay down the sword becomes the most radical act of Thorfinn's life. An act that teaches everyone that we had no enemies after all. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed that brief dive into the brilliance of Vinland Saga and want to see more like it in the future, consider a like and a sub. It goes a long way, believe me. And if my videos become unwatchable in the future, you can always unsub if that day comes. And with that said, I look forward to seeing you there, fellow anime lovers. Bye bye for now.